Hi guys, welcome to class. This is Mrs. Kegans, and today we're going to be taking a look at our first lesson from Principles of Education. So if you will click along with me, I'm going to go through our module today and tell you where we're going to get started. So if you'll follow along, we're going to go to week 1, lesson 1, and I want to start by talking about our discussion post that I posted previously. So this was something I asked you to complete prior to class, so hopefully you had time to take a look at it. I did see that some of you posted, and I loved reading your comments and discussion feedback. So let's take a look at the module, okay? So the first thing in each chapter for this class, I will always post the chapter reading using our online textbook, okay? So that's posted right here. And this was a short reading. It was just reading section 1 of chapter 1, and we were getting started learning about what it means to be a teacher. So basically, our book is going to take us all the way from the idea of what is teaching as a profession to how do you become a teacher. So chapter 1 is just a basic introduction. So I asked you guys to read from our teaching textbook and tell me 3 things. What are you interested in most in the field of education? Is there anything that stands out to you? What qualities or traits would make a good teacher or educator? We're going to talk about that later together in our lesson. And then what might a challenge be that you might face as a teacher in the future? So I gave you some guidelines. As always, just make sure that it's a thoughtful, complete sentence, focus on the topic, answer the specific questions, and then think about what you post. You know, it is posted, and we don't want to post something we would have a consequence later. So think about what you're posting and make it school appropriate. But let's take a look at our online textbook. So here it is. It might take just a sec. Here we go. So it's teaching, and chapter 1 is the teaching profession. So I asked you to look through it, and notice I always post these learning outcomes in our lesson as well, so that you can see that we're gonna have some points that we're gonna hit, okay, each week. So this chapter is basically just summarizing the qualities of a effective teacher, analyzing, like I said, the challenges that they might face, and looking at other careers or employment opportunities that are in the education field. Okay, so I asked you to read through and then answer those questions. So let's take a look at what you guys wrote and what you came up with. So at this time, I would scroll down below probably in our discussion post, and I would find some comments that the students made, and take time to ask those specific students about their comments and to expand on their thoughts. If there's anybody that hadn't made a comment prior to class, I could have noted that. I have my handy list of students here, so I could make notes and make sure that I call on those students and ask about the reading and see if I can check for understanding and make sure that they did read the assignment, or if they didn't, if I can help them understand it better. So that's just checking in, seeing if they did their reading, and going over our first discussion post. We're going to go to the next page, and it's actually just a posting that has our lesson. So you'll see that I always post the objectives, like I said, when you're logging in. This is chapter 1, so we'll do this for every chapter, so you can see what are we learning. So like I said, this is very basic. Chapter 1, we're just learning about the what does it mean to be a teacher? What are we looking for in an effective teacher? So is it any special qualities or traits? Is it, a personality characteristic that makes them stand out, that makes them more effective? So we're going to take a look at that in just a second. And then, of course, here's the TEAC standards that relate back to our objectives for this chapter. So for every chapter, I always post PowerPoint slides along with the chapter reading from the online textbook. Sometimes it's a little easier for students to scroll through and look at this instead of the text, okay? It's a little bit more summarized and easier on the eyes. Sometimes, it's hard staring at a screen. So let's take a look at the notes, and then we're going to do our first little activity, okay, guys? So there's those objectives again, and here is our first thing we're going to talk about. What makes you interested in teaching? Okay, so we're going to continue and think about what makes you specifically interested in the field of teaching? So I want you to think, is it a love for children? Do you really enjoy being around young people, kids, teenagers? And that's going to reflect what area of teaching you choose, what grade level. Maybe you had a favorite teacher. Maybe you love learning. Okay. Maybe you love being a student and you think, I love being in the classroom and I'd love to lead the learning and be the teacher. Okay. And then maybe you had a favorite teacher that inspired you. I know I remember my favorite teacher and I can picture her in my head and I can think of her classroom and all the wonderful things that we did. And I have those great memories because she was such a great teacher. But maybe you just want to make a difference in the world. So I want you to remember that what truly makes teaching a different type of career is really the long-term effect that you can have on the lives of other people. Okay, so let's take a look at our first activity. So down below here, we're going to pause in the slideshow and I want you to grab your student notes. So in the directions I posted earlier, I asked you to have these ready. You could print a copy, or I think I just said have it open on a tab, like a Google Doc, and then we're going to type and fill it in together. Okay, so let's take a look. I have my copy here. So the first activity says for you to, of course, think about all the teachers that you've had in your whole life up until now in high school. And I want you to think of positive characteristics. So I'm going to ask you to participate, okay? So Sarah, I need you to tell me a positive characteristic of an effective teacher. What is something that stands out to you? Thank you, Sarah. Okay, I like that. She said committed, okay? Let's give it just a second there. Committed, okay? So we want someone that is committed and takes time and effort every day in their teaching, right? Okay. What about, let's see, Mason. Mason, tell me something that makes an effective teacher. Oh, that's a good one. Patience. Okay. So I love that. All right. So patience is really important. No matter what age you're teaching, you want to have a lot of patience, right? And understanding. I think that's great. So at this time, I would continue asking students to fill out the document. If we could share a Google Doc, I'd actually ask them to type with me and participate as a group. Or I could ask them to split into different groups and complete it together and then share. But I love doing this because we can dialogue and talk about everything together and share maybe some of our positive experiences that inspire teaching. Okay. Their student notes also would allow them to fill in these fill in the blank notes as we go. So I usually do that just so they have a something to acknowledge as I teach and keep on pace. We wouldn't do this all in one day, of course, but this is here just for you to see an outline. And then I have another activity at the end here. So with chapter 1, we want to remember that teaching isn't the only profession that is a part of education. So I would ask the students to brainstorm with a classmate. So they could do this if we could break into different meeting groups, they would brainstorm with a classmate and try to get through the entire alphabet and think of careers that aren't teaching that are part of education. So this is helpful to them, thinking about their future, that if they like the field of education, it doesn't have to specifically be a teacher. They could be an administrator. They could be a school nurse. They could be a counselor. There's so many different areas in the school building and the education world that are just as important as teachers. So I love for them to do that. And then later in the chapter is when we start exploring what steps does it take to get to the qualifications to actually have these careers. Okay. So this would take probably a few days to get through, obviously, but I like to stop and do these activities where we fill things in together or stop and discuss. Okay. Let's go back to the module and I'll show you a few more things. There's some TED Talk videos. So I always try to pick short ones because I know that our attention span is, we don't want to watch a 20-minute TED Talk. So I picked 3, and I would ask if students would watch one, and then the next class we would discuss those, okay? Along with that, I usually close out class just so you can see I have an exit ticket at the end. So after our discussion and going through the notes, since it's the first introduction to this chapter, I would ask them to complete this exit ticket. It's just 6 questions that are multiple choice. It's actually from the textbook, basically. At the end of the reading, it's like sort of check for understanding. Did they get the lesson? Okay, we're going to take our 5 minutes to wrap up and kind of go over our lesson and how I might use different learning opportunities for different students so that they would maybe have some more freedom in our classroom to show me that they have met all the objectives. So I gave you a basic lesson, just sort of like an introduction of a chapter, but I have lots of activities and things that would go along with this chapter. I want to make sure that I mention that it's important to me that when students are online in a virtual classroom that they feel acknowledged for their effort, that they feel seen and heard. So I did earlier reference, I have my little list of students here, so I do this in my classroom even in person, but I keep tally marks and make sure that I call in every student, make sure that I praise every student that participates, and that the ones that maybe don't want to participate, I always check for understanding, make sure that they don't have any questions, and that they have my support if they need it. But I think this is a great way to, keep in check in the online classroom to make sure that students are participating and they are understanding the material. Also, different opportunities. A lot of times when I assign something or I give a project, especially, it will give you kind of like a roadmap of the objectives and in the rubric, but it will say you can turn in this assignment in 3 different ways. It could be a video where you talk to me for 5 minutes about whatever you researched, or it could be I wrote 3 paragraphs about what I researched, or maybe I made a digital media poster about this information I researched. So I really do believe that we all are different learners. We all learn in different ways, and students appreciate when they have opportunities to turn in assignments in a unique way. So in several of my assignments, you would notice that I have different options for them. So I just wanted to point that out. I do have a lot of experience using uh, Canvas, like I said, and Google Classroom. So I hope that will make it easier to transition to the program that you're using in the virtual Stride classroom. Thank you so much for listening.